remaining is I would love to do, let's see, 3 things. One, I'd love to give you some sense of pulling back the curtain a little bit on how does all this happen? How does IJM actually work? What are the sort of nuts and bolts of how IJM engages in communities and those sort of things. 2, I want to give you some sense of the movement locally that is developing around IJM. So I have a couple of colleagues that I'll introduce that will help give you a sense of that. And then 3, I would love to tell you just a couple more stories of rescue that IJM has accomplished in the last several years. And then we'll also, I guess, I'm going to add a 4th. We'll have some time for a question and answer if that's helpful. So if you have some questions, I'd be happy to make sure we have time for that. Maybe the easiest thing would be to leave those to the end. And then we'll make sure we have some questions. But thank you so much for coming out. This has been great. So I want to just begin by saying that the idea that there is this sense that this issue of human trafficking, one of the theologians I love to read is a guy named Chris Wright. I will finish one of these sentences soon. Just get my head back together. One of the theologians I love to read is an Irish guy named Chris Wright. He wrote a book called The Mission of God and the Mission of the People of God. Those books were helpful to me. And one of the things he says about justice and the content of the scriptures is that there is no other issue save idolatry that the scriptures address more than the issue of justice. Right? It's in it's in the historical books of the Old Testament, it's in the law, it's in the prophets, it's in the wisdom literature, it's in the New Testament, it's woven through everything. And one of the things that will happen, if this morning was new information for you, one of the things that will happen for you is you will begin to see the scriptures differently as you look at in the Psalms and the prophets and the stories of the New Testament. So even a passage like this, Jesus turning to Peter and saying, I will build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. When I read that passage now, after 11 years working with IJM, I think, oh yeah, Jesus fully knew what he was calling his church into when he inaugurated it, right? And that hellish places of darkness, like the place that Joe T was trapped in, that they would be no match ultimately for the church, that the church would inexorably advance into the darkness and would bring the light of Christ into places that even seem hopeless, right? So when I read Jesus saying, I will build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it, I think, oh yeah, this is how we're engaging at IJM. We're a group of Christians, all of us that work at IJM are Christians, and we are working out of our sense of being a part of the local church, engaging in these issues in the communities that we serve in around the world. So, speaking of that, that's my colleague Anu, who's leading this group of people who've been enslaved in a woodcutting operation to safety and security. And I love this picture. I don't know if you can see the look in her eyes, but there is a fierceness to Anu that you get to see right away when you know her. And I was talking with her one day. She lives in India but was visiting in DC, and I said, Anu, I love this photo. And she was like, oh, Jim, I was very angry that day. And I said, oh, what were you angry about? She said, well, I'm looking directly at a government official who's refusing to do his job. He eventually was compelled to do his job. She's a woman of great moral authority. She's great. These are the places that IJM is at work in the world. I don't know if you can see that, but to give you a sense, over the 11 years that I've been with IJM, we've expanded quite a bit. So we have casework offices that are doing the work of rescue and restoration and justice system transformation. We have 4 or 5 of them in Africa, depending on how you count them. We have several offices in Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Thailand, and the Philippines. We have offices many offices in India, actually, and several offices in Latin America. And they're engaging not exclusively in human trafficking, so we do anti-sex trafficking and anti-labor trafficking work in all different parts of the world. But we also are engaging in Kenya, for example, around police abuse of power. So police abusing their authority to improperly detain people for crimes they didn't commit. Those are cases that we'll take on in Kenya. Unprosecuted sexual assault of children, largely in Latin America. We have a sex trafficking operation in the Dominican Republic. And so we're growing a new office in El Salvador and an office in Bangkok. And as we roll forward, there'll be other We also have what we call advancement offices in Canada, the United States, the UK, Germany, the Netherlands, and Australia. And these offices are doing the work of raising the resources so that all these services can be delivered to the poor free of charge. They're working with local governments to build contacts and build political will around the world for this work. And really to mainstream IJM's theory of change. One of the things that may not be obvious to you is that engaging with local public justice systems to solve the problem of trafficking was sort of a new idea when IJM started doing it. In the sense that most justice organizations were sort of fearful and mistrustful of the police. And our approach was, well, human trafficking is already illegal in any of the places that we would go and do this work. So where the gap really is with law enforcement, not the laws themselves. So if we can actually help local law enforcement and help local government officials do the work that they're supposed to be doing already, then our hope is that over time we will see actually these justice systems transform to begin to serve the poor as they were intended, and then we can go on and do something else. And we're actually seeing that begin to function as well, which I'll talk about in a minute. So what are we seeking to do in these places where we exist in the world? We're seeking to do four things. We protect the poor by violence by doing these four things. First, we want to bring rescue. We want to make sure that, I can't say that, but you can't see that, I don't think, but it says rescue victims. So this is what I was sort of talking through, and the way that the Samaritan actually got involved. He offered multiple levels of care. So we want to rescue victims. We want to insert ourselves between the victim and their abuser, and we want to pull them out of their situation of violence. So for kids who are in situations where they're being sexually abused, we're going to pull them out of those situations. For minors that are trapped in brothels, we're going to work with local authorities to pull them out of those situations. For people who are being persecuted by the police, we're going to get involved in those situations and remove the people from danger. Then secondly, we're going to restore survivors, because if you take a girl like Jo T and you rescue her from the brothel and then just drop her off on the street corner and say good luck, she's not going to have a good time, right? There's a huge amount of trauma and a lot of things that have already happened in her life that need to be dealt with. So aftercare is a huge need. Dealing with trauma-focused therapy and those sort of things, and then education and training opportunities so that we can mitigate some of the factors that have made these people so vulnerable in the first place. But if you do that, if you rescue people and work on restoration, and you just keep working that loop and rescuing victims, and you never deal with the perpetrators, then they're just going to go out and abuse more people. So what you have to do is bring accountability to perpetrators. And this is one of the other things that distinguishes IJM. We will go after and fight hard to see that local law is enforced. Some of the cases will take up to 10 years to process through the court systems, and we will just refuse to go away. Because once people start going to jail for committing these crimes, that's when things really begin to change. And all we're doing is enforcing local law, right? There are some places where a few laws can be improved in certain kinds of ways, but most of the places we're working in the world actually have stringent penalties for these crimes. They're just not able to enforce them. So we're helping them do that. And then ultimately, if you do those three things well, what happens is you become the expert in what's broken about the public justice system. And if you've built good relationships with authorities in the public justice system, you can actually begin to work toward reform. So we're working toward justice system transformation in all of the places where we're doing this work. And we have some amazing success stories. So when we started being able to measure the work that we're doing, it was while we were working in the Philippines in about 2005, we actually got a grant from the Gates Foundation to study what the long-term downstream effect was of IJM's work on a major metropolitan ecosystem of brothels in the sex trade. So we started up a brand new office in the second largest metropolitan area in the Philippines, a place called Cebu. And before we began the work, we actually did an assessment of the level of victimization of minors in the brothel system. We actually measured how many minors were in the brothel system. I can talk all about how that's done if that's of interest to anybody. And then we ran operations for 4 years with some moderate goals. We wanted to rescue about 125 victims. We wanted to see about 85 arrests within those 4 years, and we wanted to see the first of those arrests coming to trial by the end of the 4 years. And basically, we worked for 4 years and essentially accomplished all those goals. We got the 125 rescues, the 85 arrests, and things were starting to go to trial. And then we executed 4 years later that same measure. What's the level of victimization of minors in the brothel system? Because we were hoping we could prove that it had been reduced by up to 20%. We're hoping that would say something in the human rights community. What we found when we did the second assessment, and this was all verified by independent criminologists, what we found when we did the second assessment was not a 20% reduction, but a 79% reduction over 4 years of the number of minors involved in brothel systems. And we wrote a report on it. It was all independently verified, and the Philippines national government said, "This is great work. Where can we go next?" So we went to Manila, and then we went to a place called Angeles City, and repeated those results. 75% in the Manila area, 86% in the Angeles City area, all over 4 years. So what I want you to walk away with this morning is this sense that we are more hopeful than we have ever been about this problem. It's sort of like we're feeling like we now know what the vaccine is against slavery, and all we have to do is figure out how to deliver in this moment. So that's a little bit more of the technical stuff about what IJM is doing far, far away. I want to invite my colleague Michael. Michael Lewis works for IJM in Texas and environments. It's his job to connect with people in churches and to help people understand what's going on locally and what they can do to be involved in the movement. So Michael's going to tell you a little bit about his work.
Thank you, Jim. Good afternoon. So I'm Michael Lewis. I'm part of a U.S.-based team called Church Mobilization. Big fancy word for how we can engage God's church in this work of protecting the poor from violence. I'm based in Houston, Texas, part of a nationwide team where I have colleagues in other major United States cities. And our work is to, again, invite local congregations into our work. So what are the pathways to engagement for congregations like Trietsch to get involved with the work that we're doing abroad? As Jim showed you the map earlier, we have about 18 different field offices in 11 different countries. And so there are many field offices that have partnership opportunities with congregations. And so a large part of my work is building those connections where you may have a heart for a certain part of the world, or there might be a part of the world that you're not in yet, but you'd like to be in or you would intend to be in. And it's creating a pipeline of communication where your support supports the work of that field office, and you in turn receive communication as to the specific things that are taking place in that field office. And so I have conversations like that. In addition, I have conversations around activities throughout the year where congregations can get involved with the work of IJM by things like Freedom Sunday. You, in essence, have done a Freedom Sunday today in your promotion and your highlighting of our work throughout the entire Lenten season. So many congregations will engage in efforts like this as well. We're also very fortunate to have here in Texas, where I do the majority of my work, we're very fortunate to have volunteer teams. And so the volunteer teams are vital because we always receive the question as to what can I do locally to help with the work of IJM? Because again, referring to the map, all of our casework is done internationally. As you hear the 40 million number communicated to you in terms of those who were enslaved, 99% of that is off our shores. And so while Dallas, like many other U.S. cities, is awakening to the issue of local human trafficking, huge volume of this issue is outside the United States. At the same time, people still, again, want to get involved with our work. And so we have local volunteer teams. We have one in Houston, where I am. We also have one here in Dallas, where these are individuals that have learned about IJM. Perhaps they formerly worked for IJM. Perhaps they were a former intern or fellow with IJM and reside in the DFW area, and have gifted us a portion of their time on a weekly basis to advance the work that we're doing. Not just from a giving perspective, but also building a prayer network, building an advocacy network, and building a network of colleges and universities that have chapters to support our work. And so we're very grateful this morning to have two of those volunteers that are with us that are part of the local Dallas-Fort Worth area. So we have Jesse Tidmore. Jesse, if you'll stand. Jesse is a member of the Village Church Plano, and has known about IJM for quite some time, and she is serving as a, is it Freedom Partner? Student coordinator and church coordinator? Okay, very good. Do you want to say a word or two about how you got connected with IJM, or whichever one?
Good afternoon, hi. So I heard about IJM about 2.5 years ago, my church did a small portion of Freedom Sunday. So I saw a 3-minute Who You Are, like Who IJM Is video, and it captured my heart immediately. So I learned more about IJM, and then kind of on the cusp of that, they were creating these local volunteer groups, and so I was invited to join one. So I have been on the team for about 2.5 years now, and as Michael said, I mobilize students on college campuses and in high schools as well to join the justice movement. And then I work with church mobilizers on our team who are working with their congregation to bring Freedom Sunday to their congregation, and then just to put the work that is needed in front of their members. And so while the field offices are pulling out survivors and restoring them, we also have a part as a body of Christ, the members working as one. So bringing the fundraising and the means in which to do the work to those field offices is huge, and it's tantamount. And then educating people that there are 40 million people currently enslaved. And then raising up prayer warriors. So as you've probably seen, we have a local prayer gathering April 13th at Park Cities Baptist Church from 5 to 7 p.m. We would love for your church to come with us and pray. I'm so encouraged by the work that is being done here, and just very, very grateful that you all are wanting to have your eyes open to the issues that the body of Christ can fight on behalf of those who do not have a voice.
And also with us this morning, we have Jenna Wynn, who's also a local volunteer who is probably just going to hang in the back because she has Cora Wynn next to her, future IJM volunteer. Jenna is serving as our advocacy coordinator, is that correct? So Jenna is responsible for, if you're on our distribution list already, we had a couple of events in the last couple of weeks, and one scheduled this week, I believe, with representatives of our U.S. senators and local House representatives as well. And these are actual activities that are taking place in the DFW area where you can go and visit with our representatives and their staffers and make them aware of the issues that are going on in the world and how IJM is working to address them. So these two ladies are remarkable. There are about 8 more like them working in different capacities here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so again, they are building the on-ramps for how you yourselves can get involved with our work locally. So you can talk to them afterwards. We also have a little card on the back to learn more about how you can actually volunteer. And then there's information on the date and time and location of the local prayer gathering that Jesse talked about. So thank you.
So to give you just a little bit more of a sense of the picture of what the work looks like on the ground, I want to tell you a couple more stories. I want to talk to you about Cassie. The work in the Philippines that I mentioned was actually remarkably successful in what we would call dealing with venue-based sex trafficking of minors. And so nationally through the Philippines, the Philippines National Police have now an excellent methodology for how they're engaging on that issue. And so we're not doing any venue-based anti-sex trafficking work in the Philippines anymore because we don't have to. But what is going on is this sort of perfect storm in the Philippines of a couple things that are happening at once. Broadband internet has arrived in the Philippines and is accessible in all kinds of different places now, which can be great. The fact that English is widely spoken in the Philippines by people everywhere, children, adults, means though that if you have access to a webcam and to a child, then you can put that child on the internet and you can offer them up to be abused by English speakers around the world. So what is now being called cyber sex trafficking of children is happening in the Philippines, and this is what all of our casework has transitioned to in offices in the Philippines. So Cassie would tell you that she was moved 800 miles away from her childhood home at one point because she needed to she was trying to get a good education in Manila. She grew up in a part of the Philippines that didn't have electricity. It was a very simple life that she was living. So she moved to the Philippines, but the man she trusted actually to help her find this education began to exploit her in this way. Over the course of roughly 8 years, she was put online in front of a webcam, and pedophiles from all over the world could simply order what abuse acts would happen, and they would be carried out. And that have access to the children are also the people that are close to them, right? So it is an aunt or an uncle, sometimes it's a parent that's involved in the abuse, and it's a pretty dark, it can be a pretty dark situation. That's one set of situations. This is Rahman and his family. Rahman lives in India. He's actually a third-generation slave. His father and his grandfather before him were enslaved in India's bonded debt slavery. Or the way it works out in India is if somebody falls sick and you don't have enough money to care for them, you can go to a money lender and he'll give you the $35 you need to get whatever medical care you need. But you have to promise yourself or one of your children in return to work off the debt, quote unquote. But when you go to work off the debt, it actually never is worked off. They charge you for the food that you eat and all of that. It's a sort of a familiar scam scenario, right? So Rahman's grandfather contracts this small debt and goes to work it off, but it's never worked off. So his father, and then Rahman himself, leaves school in the 4th grade and goes to work at this rice mill called the Powerhouse Rice Mill. And as a 4th grade educated young man, his days become days of raking, boiling, stacking, drying rice and putting it in huge bags. And this is what he does with his life. It's hard to imagine, but let me just play you some undercover video of what this looks like. This is the Powerhouse Rice Mill, and this is what life looks like for somebody who works there. Carrying 100-pound bags of rice back and forth in the hot sun, boiling it, letting it dry out in the sun, cleaning it, bagging it, stacking it. So at IJM, the question for us was, why does this happen? If you were going to get involved, how do you sort of take apart this situation? Well, it turns out that it's happening in Rahman's case because of this man, Mr. Kandasamy. Mr. Kandasamy owns the Powerhouse Rice Mill, and he, like many business owners in his area, just openly runs his business on the backs of slaves like Rahman. And so you can, as we did, you can set up these little operations where you go in pretending to be someone who's looking to start up a similar business, and you interview Mr. Kandasamy about how he conducts his business. And so one of our undercover investigators did this, and we got the following video from Mr. Kandasamy. It's subtitled because he's not speaking English, but see if you can pick up what he's saying. We won't let that happen. We'll just send the henchmen out to drag them back and beat the people that try to escape in front of all the others. And generally that takes care of business. That's how they run the business. So it is hard to imagine that we're living in a world that has people in it like Mr. Kandasamy, is it not? Someone who wakes up every morning intent to perpetrate that kind of evil on neighbors. But it turns out just true that these people exist. It is also true that it is possible to stop it. So in cases like this with Mr. Kandasamy, it is possible to actually gather Rahman's casework information, to go to local authorities, and to help them understand that on their watch, bonded labor slavery is actually happening in the area that they're responsible for. It's really challenging because everybody knows who Mr. Kandasamy is, and everybody knows that he has political power. But he doesn't have infinite power. All you need to do is find just a little bit more power than he has. The right public justice system official, the right person that can actually begin to make the dominoes start to fall. So in Mr. Kandasamy's case, or pardon me, in Rahman's case, we actually were able to go in and document a story, bring it to local authorities. It's the same process, and see that they actually were, compelled to do their jobs. Forget where we're going here. Oh yeah, there's David again saying this is something God actually cares about. generational abuse stop. This next photo is one of my favorite IJM photos. This is the day that the family got their goat. So they've been rescued, obviously, at this point. And the thing I love about that photo is that the little boy in the middle is like, he's got mischief in his eyes. He's like, he's got some time and space to be a boy. And I think there's some beauty in that. But again, you can't just rescue Ramon and his family. You have to actually work through a whole process of helping them heal and develop skills. And so Ramon has gone through a leadership training program with IJM. He's actually become the equivalent of a local politician in his village, and he's petitioning the Indian government to bring water and electricity to his village. He's actually doing very, very well. The whole family is. But what about Mr. Kandasamy? Because what actually happened in this case was the first time we did the operation on the powerhouse rice mill, he was sentenced to, I believe, what's called until the rising of the court. So we went through this whole legal process, and the sentence that he got was essentially the judge saying, "You are required to stay in custody until I stand up from this chair." Right? Sentenced until the rising of the court. Then he goes back and just fills his rice mill again with a whole other group of slaves. And there is I forget the details around this, but there is a double jeopardy standard in India as well, so you can't prosecute him for the same crime. So the team just goes to work on figuring out how can we bring this guy to justice, and they work on it for 9 years. 9 years of refusing to go away. More operations, more people rescued, and finally getting charges to stick, and Mr. Kandasamy ends up, to his shock and horror, going to jail. He went to jail on a statute that dates back to 1885, the title of which is Habitually Dealing in Slaves. He went to jail as a slave dealer, right? So we didn't get him on some ancillary charge. It was like he went in for the titular charge that he was responsible for. Not every day is that gratifying, but some of them are. As it was actually quite remarkable, and sort of ironically, he was sentenced to hard labor, believe it or not. So that was how that case went down. And then in the Philippines, with this cyber sex trafficking situation, it's super complicated. In the Philippines, somehow one IP address doesn't always just point to one machine. It can sometimes point to a neighborhood. I still don't quite understand how that works, but our investigators are talking to us about that. Philippines National Police are very, very hardworking, but understaffed and undertrained. They don't have the equipment they need to deal with this. So IJM's assistance in coming through with cyber forensics and all the stuff that's necessary makes it possible for people actually to be rescued. So while Cassie was saying, she would be by day going to school, and at night she would have these horrific experiences in front of a video camera with customers located all around the world. She says it was really hard. I was thinking, I want to die. I want to die because of this pain, but I can't. I want to stop my breath, but it's always, oh, I'm still breathing. Why can't I die? Right? This is how she's feeling. We were looking for her, though, and ultimately we found her. We worked with the Philippine authorities and U.S. Homeland Security to pinpoint Cassie's location and to rescue her and 6 other kids that were living in the same nightmare of exploitation. And the man who profited from their abuse for so many years was arrested, imprisoned, and is now standing trial. So it is possible. I want to give you a little bit of Cassie in her own words. Oh, actually, yeah. Let me continue to finish the India story. So as this work develops, we actually got a grant from Google several years ago, 2010 or so, or 11, where they were interested in saying, Google's foundation was interested in asking, is there any way you can propagate this work through partners? Other NGOs that are working in India, can you train them to do what you're already doing? And so when our work in India started, it was, we had 2 bonded labor offices that were working in southern India, and it just felt like little drops in a huge bucket. And then this picture was a pretty significant picture from 2011 of the largest rescue IJM ever accomplished in India, 514 people rescued on the same day. And this was because the government called us and said, hey, we think we found 2 brick kilns across from each other that are abusing people. Would you come and help us and support this operation? And in one day, 514 14 people are rescued. Then the Google grant comes and we start looking to replicate our work through partners. This is what IJM's reach looked like before we started working through partners. Just that blue part in the southern part of India, this is what it looks like now, as we have partners online. So the whole scene is changing. It doesn't mean that slavery is going to end like tomorrow in India, but we do feel like we are the generation that will deal with the death blow. So of the world's 40 million slaves, experts would say close to half of them are in India alone, maybe 16 million. So there's a lot of work to be done, but this map is actually quite hopeful action. And here's Cassie in Washington, D.C., actually, rallying the troops to the fight against human trafficking. She is a powerhouse at this point of like determination and healing. She is quite remarkable. And I have a little video I want to share.
It's really hard. It's like I was thinking that I want to die because of this pain, but I can't. When first time my recruiter telling me that Manila is very nice, he said, so I can wear a nice clothes, and then he taking care of me. He told me that he can help me to reach all my dreams. First time in Manila, it was very happy because there's a lot of building. You wear nice clothes, you have your own money, you can stay in a nice house. So Manila is very nice compared to my place. We are 6 victims inside of the house of my recruiter. My recruiter hurt me every day when I do something bad that he don't like, because he want every day, I need to follow him. But if I don't follow him, he's going to hurt me, just punk me, slap me in the face in front of the people. I really want to kill him. I really want to die that time, but I can't. It's feel very lonely for me because I was very far from my family and I can't tell them what happened to me because I was very scared. When they rescued us, it made me heal all the pain. It is in my second home. I realized everything, that you don't need to lose hope. If I see or if I hear or there is a victim of human trafficking like us, I just want her to comfort her, help her to move forward and just fight for your rights. Because that's the start where I stand now.
So that's Cassie in her own words. We had a large gathering last year in Texas with it was a prayer gathering of about 4,000, 5,000 people, and Cassie actually came and spoke. It was really quite remarkable. Well, in terms of presentation, I don't want to overwhelm you even more with any more than that. But if there are any questions that you would like to ask, anything I could be helpful to explain, I'd be happy to do that as well. So, any questions?
Is there any way, are you doing anything as far as educating the people that are going online and doing this, what they're actually doing? I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the question is, are we doing anything to educate the people that are going online as users of this sort of stuff, right, that's being generated on the backs of children like Cassie? We are not directly doing it. There are organizations that are doing a better and better job of that, I feel like. The connection between pornography usage and human trafficking, it's a blurry line that nobody's been able to articulate all that clearly. And I think the better we can do that, the better off we are as a church. So we talk about pornography as a personal purity issue, but we don't talk about it as a justice issue. And we need to do that more, I think, as we're educating and training people. Does that make sense? So we're not doing that directly. There's a huge need for it, and I think it would be great for us to think about that more deeply. That's not to say that pornography isn't a personal purity issue. It is both, right? An issue of personal purity and an issue of justice. Yes, please.
How do you feel like that's becoming your attention? You mentioned in some cases, local authorities ask for help. What's the most common way that you all get engaged in this?
Yeah, the most common way that we find people like Cassie or Rahman or Gideon or Joe T is we go looking for them. So we have investigators whose job it is to go out and find them. And most of the investigators that work for IJM, like I said, we're all Christians. Most of the investigators come from a long career in the military or the police and have had undercover experience in some other context. And they bring those skills to us and use them. I get to interact with them sometimes in some of the work, and they are just absolutely delighted to get to do it. They're not normal people. I don't know if any of you are in the room, but they're built differently than most of us, and it is their joy to get to use their special skill in this way. I mean, it's not that it's a burden as well, but they're really remarkable people.
You mentioned a lot of rescues sound like there's one person or two people at a time, and then the biggest one is 500. What's typical?
What's the typical rescue? Just to repeat the question, I hear one or two, and then 514. What's the typical one? I would say it's a handful at a time, 6 people, 5 people, depending on the context of the work. Often in the Dominican Republic, the sex trafficking work that we're doing there is usually one victim at a time due to the nature of how it's working in that context. The cyber sex trafficking stuff in the Philippines, often like Cassie, it'll be a handful of children, and they're usually younger that we end up rescuing. And then in a brick kiln, it can be as many as dozens often, because it's a big factory essentially.
So when it's a factory situation, does it shut down that operation temporarily?
Often the operation will be shut down if, particularly in the Philippines, a lot of the brothels were shut down when they were found to be trafficking minors. In the Indian context, some of those factories will be shut down. The idea now is that the Indian government itself is now starting to do these sweeps in southern India to make sure that factories aren't using slave labor. Yes, please.
Ran a regional task force for trafficking. It's very interesting that one of the websites was shut down within Dallas, yet he received criticism as Big Brother shutting down the internet. How do you handle the criticism that you're basically too focused on the justice part of it and not, because some agencies will support these brothels through healthcare and other things rather than just trying to get rid of the problem. And this is what, the task force guys are talking about. They're actually trying to prosecute these folks, take them down, rather than placate them. How do you answer that?
Yeah. So the question was about a lot of approaches to problems like these are approaches of education or care for victims, but the idea of eradication that comes through prosecution of criminals. How are people critical of that, and how do you respond to that criticism? Is that a fair summary? Yes, people are critical of it, and I think partly it's because the police are not seen as helping in a lot of these contexts, right? They are often complicit in the. I mean, a brothel at the end of the day is just a business. If the customers can find it, then so can the police, right? And for some reason, they're not finding it, and so you need to find out why that is and get at that. But we would say. A couple of different things to that criticism. One is, well, if we're talking just about the social context, all we're doing is helping the country enforce the laws that are already on the books, right? These statutes, these legal statutes wouldn't exist if they weren't the express desire of a set of people that would govern. So we're not bringing in our own agenda, we're just helping you reinforce your agenda. Secondly, I would say that as Christians, we would say, this actually is the purview of the church. Like the church is hardwired to be light in darkness. And we actually have to work hard to dull that light. We got pretty good at it at various times, at dulling the light, right? But this is the church being the church. And so light is going to shine into darkness, and that will have a cleansing effect that is really difficult for people who are enjoying darkness. And then ultimately, I would say that the reason third-party criminologist verification is so important in the process is there is not very good data anywhere in the world on all of this stuff, right? We hear things like Super Bowl Sunday is the highest incidence of human trafficking in the U.S., but we don't actually have any data to support that statement. We're pretty sure it's probably true. So the reason we have data about a 79% reduction in Cebu, the Philippines, is because we gathered it and we had it assessed and approved, right? So I think the final argument would be to say the only programs we know that work are the ones that we're involved in because we've gathered data that prove that they work. So the education programming and the other kinds of programming, I think, probably have a positive effect, but nobody's been able to measure it. So we're going to do the thing that we learned how to do, and we're going to commit to doing it in places where there's no 911 phone call that anybody can make. There is, I would say, too, when we started doing unprosecuted sexual abuse work of minors in the Latin American context, some of these abusive situations would pop up in the church, and it would be an elder who had abused a child in the church, or a pastor, or something happens, in churches in the U.S. as well, of course. And the knee-jerk reaction of the church would be to say, oh, but we're different. We need to solve this problem differently. The perpetrator needs to ask for forgiveness, and the victim needs to forgive the perpetrator, and then we're done. And I think part of what we've been saying is, like, absolutely forgiveness is important, but forgiveness doesn't mean that all consequences are erased, right? So in the Philippines, we're actually working in the cyber sex trafficking work, there is some reconciliation that the Philippines national government wants to have happen between the relative who has been in the abusive role and the child, but that doesn't negate the court process at all. It's just part of the healing process for both perpetrator and victim. Yes, please.
You mentioned that a big part of what y'all do is help them enforce their laws and the things that they have. So domestically, y'all are really involved in helping laws become laws here in the U.S. too, right? Is that what y'all do a lot domestically?
Yeah, so we aren't doing casework domestically. I don't know that we would never do it domestically in the U.S., but our particular expertise has become working outside in places where the justice system is broken down significantly more than what we're experiencing here. No 911, for instance. But what we are doing in the U.S. is helping to raise awareness, because when the public justice system does function, awareness is key, right? People in Flower Mound knowing that human trafficking can actually and often does happen in places where you least expect it. It's that house that nobody knew to ask questions about. It's in the wake of the Patriots Super Bowl win, it's that spa in Florida where all the men are lined up at noon to go in and get their nails done, right? And we can joke about things like that, but the realization is, oh, actually people were driven to that shop in a van, and they were pumped in through the back door, and they slept on the massage tables like they were trafficking victims. So we're working to educate and to raise awareness. We're working with the U.S. government to create funding opportunities for organizations that are doing this work, both domestically and abroad. And any of the advocacy work that you would do with Jesse and other volunteers would be very, very targeted on these initiatives, either locally or internationally, and you'd be well educated about that. Any other questions? These are great.
I have one. I think the gospel being grace, we all know what's right and wrong. I think everybody does, regardless if they even say you're what their current status is under spiritual law. So my feeling is these people who are perpetrating this know what's wrong as well.
Yeah.
So it's driven by greed, it's pure evil. What do you see as the root cause people can do this? I mean, I have a hard time
Conceptualizing. Did everybody hear that? Like, we all have a sort of basic sense of right and wrong. What's the, you know, whether we're oriented toward faith or not, what's the deal? How are these people wired? What's going on? I don't feel like I have a satisfying answer to that question, I'm sorry to say. I will say that once we give into the breakdown of any sort of human order to the point where one person is willing to own another person or to extract from them by force whatever it is that they want to take, whether it's their labor or anything else, that all hell breaks loose, quite literally. I mean, we've had these sort of chilling experiences of these perpetrators who, when they're finally caught, when they finally know they're caught and the penny has dropped and the bribe is not going to get them out or whatever it is, there's this sort of deflation that happens to them. And several of our field staff will talk about this sense that I don't want to over-spiritualize these things, but they've given themselves over to a kind of evil that was part of them in a way, I think. And that when it's done with them, it leaves. And they're sitting there, you know, they're culpable, but they're sitting there and then they take the rap. Right? So I mean, evil is real in the world, I would say. Yeah, let's just keep shining light into the darkness. Well, thank you very much. Clay, did you want to, I saw your hand flash up there.
Can you say a bit about these spiritual practices for IJM? Because that is inspiring to go and turn into this extremely tough work that you do.
Yeah, so my role at IJM is I do less speaking externally now because my role is more internally focused over the last 5 years. I'm our VP of Spiritual Formation, which means that it is my job to care for our staff in the various roles as they engage in the work. Our goal for our staff at IJM is that during their engagement with us, they will experience increasing resilience and deepening spiritual maturity. Right? You could imagine that you would come and do this work for a little while and be so worn out by it that you have to go and do something else, right? Just kick your feet up on the beach for a while. Our goal is actually the opposite. That coming to work for us would mean that you would experience increasing resilience and deepening spiritual maturity. How is that accomplished? Well, we're set up a little bit like a monastic movement, a movement of monks and nuns. So you come to work for IJM, we're going to ask you to engage in a series of spiritual disciplines every single day. Every day at every IJM office starts with 30 minutes of prayer before you engage in the work. So at the DC office, everybody shows up at 8:30 and sits in silence in their desks in prayerful preparation for the day. It's a little weird, but it's very awesome. So that first half hour of the day is whatever I need it to be so that I can prepare myself for whatever's coming, right? And it's been hugely helpful to me. I will say that not any one day of that half an hour of stillness has been life-changing, but 10 years of it has been miraculous, right? Amazing. So that's the first half hour of the day. And then we'll work from 9 to 11, and then we stop work at 11, and everybody gathers in the largest conference room in whatever office that they're in and prays for the work for half an hour, for everything that's going on all over the world, celebrates the wins, lifts up to God the weight of the disappointments that we've experienced. So that's an hour a day that's devoted to prayer. And then every quarter we're going to take a spiritual retreat. We're going to stop working. We're going to go off usually on a Friday. We're going to do a little bit of teaching, a little bit of worship, and then give people an hour and a half or 2 hours of guided silent reflection. Silence is this remarkable thing that surfaces all kinds of things from the depths of your soul. And God ministers to you in silence in a way that is really beautiful. And then we'll come back together, we'll have lunch, we'll talk a little bit in small groups, and then we'll tell everybody to go home at like 3 o'clock. Like, don't go back to the office, we're done for the weekend. Go and have a wonderful weekend. So that'll be a retreat we'll do 4 times a year. And then once a year, we'll ask all of our staff to take a personal retreat day, a day of solitude, we call it. It's a paid day to go off and shape it in whatever way is going to be helpful for you to connect with God about the year you're coming from and the year you're heading into. So those 4 spiritual disciplines account for roughly 15% of any IJM employee's time. And if you think about the money we're paying people not to work, it runs out to about $3.6 million a year for all of our staff worldwide, for the 1,100 staff worldwide. So it's a deep commitment to spiritual formation. So that's the core of it. So we're going to live in those rhythms because we're committed to this idea that the energy to do the work comes from God, the weight of the work belongs on God, not on us. And these are disciplines for throwing it off. Thanks for that question. I think that's a helpful place to end. Thank you all so much. I will be praying for you and your journey. I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing, and I look forward to seeing what God will do. Can I close this in prayer? Now, it's good to reflect, God, that there is nothing that we walk out of this room knowing that you didn't already know. There's nothing that we walk out of this room feeling that you haven't already felt. And so as we seek to continue to take steps forward, as we seek to continue to say yes to whatever it is you are calling us to, just pray that you would, in gentleness and winsomeness, that you would invite us to take these little steps forward, that we might, like children, just enter into this family business of rescuing the poor from violence. And that as we seek to do this as your church, you would be glorified, God, and people would say, if the church is going to do anything, man, that is what it should be doing in the world. So we ask, God, that you would give us whatever it is that we need personally. If anyone's feeling weighed down by any of the stories, we pray that you, God, would minister to them in kindness and gentleness, that you would lift any weight off anyone's shoulders, and that you would help us know what it is that you are calling us to, inviting us to. We ask all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you very much.